Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I've been excited all week about this. This guy is a legend in the state of Connecticut. He's a broadcast legend, newscaster, you name it. He's done it all in his career that has spanned, I believe, 54 years. And it is my honor to introduce to you the one and only Al Terzi. And Al, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's always nice to be anywhere where fun is happening.
So, Al, I think the first thing I would ask you is, as a young kid, what it's kind of hard when you're young. You have different aspirations, but what did you want to do when you were maybe say 12 or 13 years old? Did you have any idea?
Not then. It wasn't until I was 16 or 17, and because my cousin was a disc jockey on the radio, I would follow around with him and hang out and join in his practice sessions. Join him in his practice sessions. I wasn't practicing myself because I didn't really know too much about it, but he inspired me. He actually told me, if you can read this section from the newspaper, read a paragraph or two from this newspaper. I want to hear how you sound. And he gave me an audition because he was going to be, he said he was applying to several stations in a larger area, larger market, more populated area. This was in a small town in upstate New York, by the way, a place called Little Falls. And his name was Don DeRosa. And he eventually worked, I think, down in the capital region, in the Albany area, and then finished his career in Syracuse. But when he tried me out, when he conducted that interview, he said, you're pretty good. If I get a job in a better market, I'm going to introduce you to the general manager. And I said, oh, that's great. And he did. And I took an audition with the general manager, and I was hired on the spot. And right after my cousin got his new job in Utica, and it's funny. I said, well, how much am I going to make? He said, well, we're a small operation. It was a 250 watt station, which means that they could probably broadcast to perhaps 3 blocks away or something like that. No, pretty much the town could hear his signal, but beyond the town itself, there was nobody listening. My price was $1 an hour. My first job.
Wow.
$1 an hour. And boy, I was happy to have that. And I continued doing it in my senior year of high school, which I was just finishing up by the time I got the job, and did some on-air work in Binghamton, where I initially went to college. And the career went on from there. I did radio, I did TV. And of course, as you know, in this area in Connecticut, I've been at all 4 of the major TV stations, and I've had a great career. Now, of course, I have been enjoying watching our son Tony's career. He's been on the air for a number of years, and he's right now, though, in a different position. He took a position with the city of Meriden to be their strategic communications person. And in fact, he was on the air on Channel 3 the other day when they were doing a piece from the Hubbard Park display for Christmas. And he did a great job. So, but now he's no longer in broadcasting either. I retired during the COVID episode. I didn't actually get COVID, but until probably a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
But I was boosted to the hilt, and so my wife and I both, and what we had it lasted about a day and a half, literally. So we're grateful for that.
Right. So let me ask you, Al. After high school got out, obviously you went to college, stuff like that. But I know a lot of people over the years have went to broadcasting schools. I went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Did you ever do that as well, just to kind of learn the rules of the game? Especially radio. They do a great job teaching your radio there.
Oh, yes. It's very important. And I think that's it's very important for people who get into this business to start in radio, I think, because you can learn a lot in that part of your career. And as it develops and you do get an audition to be on television as well, I think if you work with your voice, where it's just your voice that people are hearing, they're not seeing you, and you make your mark with that, then it's a lot easier to make your mark in TV, because there's so many other aspects of the business that you have to be aware of and comfortable with, because people now see you and what you're doing and what you're wearing and that sort of thing. So I recommend anybody who wants to get the broadcasting, do the radio part or do what you're doing, and learn from that and then move on.
Right. And so I believe, Al, if I'm correct, your first job was again in radio at WTIC in 1968. You came there. Is that correct?
That's correct. And back then, WTIC Radio was affiliated with, actually, there were two radio stations. One was FM and one was AM. And they also had the TV station, Channel 3, at that time. So when I got my job there, and it was no longer $1 an hour, it was, I moved up to, I think I was making $160 a week or something like that. And we worked all different schedules in all three of the media choices that they offered. TV, reading the news. We were news readers back then. We weren't allowed to. They had a news department who prepared the news, and all we could do, that was the rule, all we could do was read the news. But I learned a lot from that too. And then eventually, of course, you had to be able to write the news too. And then that was another educational step. And I really did enjoy my time working for Channel 3, and then in later years, the other three major stations, Fox. In fact, Tony was at Fox, and we worked together on occasion when I was working there after I had left Channel 3 for the second time. Yeah, I was at Channel 3 twice, and I also worked at Channel 8 and Fox. Fox was my last stop. And that's when COVID came along in 2020, and they sent people home because they didn't want to increase the chance that anybody coming in with a flu virus at all, to any degree, is going to pass it on. So I stayed home for a long time. And then I got tired of waiting, and I said, I'm going to be 80 before too long, so I want to, I want to get back into TV if I can. But if I can't, I think I'm just going to call it a career, and that's what I did. I called it a career, and it was a great career. I mean, for me, I got so much enjoyment out of it. People still remember me. I mean, they'll stop me in the street or in the supermarket and say hello, and that's like that's $1 million plus right there, just when people want to talk to you. If they keep walking, that's a problem.
Definitely. And Al, the thing too about radio, which I've kind of brought this up to other people I've interviewed who've done radio, is, it's not about just going on the air. It's not about just getting the stories and reading them on the air. You got to do so much work that sometimes you don't always get paid for, because you might get paid for 4 hours, but sometimes you got to do 8 hours worth of work. And one of the things that I know, like with radio, is, you would have to do things like call the local police station, see if anything's going on. And sometimes they're helpful, but sometimes, they're busy and they can't really be bothered like that. So it's tough as a reporter to try to get information, because you're not always gonna get it.
Yeah, that's true. And that's frustrating, but you obviously, as you know, you have to temper your frustration and be cordial with the people who are providing information for you to use, and be supportive of them, and pat them on the back, because they deserve it. The police, the fire, any of the people who are involved in protecting lives and Um, you gotta say how much you appreciate what they do, and they're more likely to be more forthcoming, as much as they can. In the case of police work, obviously they can't. They may tell you some things privately, but not for broadcast. And if you respect that, it's fine. If you don't, it's going to be tough to get information after that.
Right. One of the things too, Al, that happens in radio and TV is you mentioned before you were at different stations. You do move around quite a bit. That's part of the business. And I think after like 10 years at WTIC, you went to a station called WPEC in West Palm, Florida.
Yes,
In
Channel 12. Yeah.
yeah, in 1978, and you were there for about 2 years. So talk about that experience because you also have to learn the community and how they do things and stuff like that because you're not always in the same state, the same town. So you have to kind of, you know, adjust to that a little bit.
Yes, you do. You have to, wherever you work, you have to embrace it and its people. And you have to have enough interest in the community to go out and appear at events and salute people that who are being honored. And you have to know about the makeup of the community and what kinds of jobs people get in that community. What is it known for? Get out to the area restaurants because you're bound to meet people there who want to talk to you. I hope they want to talk to you. If they don't want to talk to you, that's another story. But yeah, it's important to get involved in the community in which you work and really understand the community's history. So coming into Hartford back in 1968, this was after a 7-year stint in the United States Air Force, where I was a linguist. Yes, I came to Connecticut because the Air Force, after I enlisted in 1961, sent me to Yale. They sent me to Yale, and where I had to learn languages, foreign languages, and this was for intelligence work, where we would monitor the communications of a particular target country. I'm sorry, not company. And for example, my first stop was at Yale. I was learning Korean, and I remember I had to give the graduation speech, and I had to speak it in Korean.
Oh, wow.
And it's I don't know if you've ever heard Korean, but I still remember my opening line. And brace yourself now. 오늘 제가 여러분들에게 말씀드리게 되어 참으로 기쁩니다. 그러나 여기 안에 떠서 빨리 나가고 싶었는데. Basically, what I just said, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak to you, but it's a little warm in here. I guess the air conditioning is not working, and I'm going to speak briefly. So that's how Korean sounds anyway. And as it turns out, while I was in Korea, I had an invitation to come back to Yale, but to learn Chinese, and I did that as well. I'm not gonna give you an example of Chinese, but because it's although I can speak a little bit of it. 我跟你讲, 今天天气不错. I said the weather's not bad today. And you notice the difference in the language. Perhaps you did. The Korean language is more guttural, but it is still beautiful, and so is Chinese. But Chinese has the tones, and you have to get the tones just right. If you say ma, you're talking about your mother. Yeah. If you say ma, it means you're talking about a horse.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get those mixed up. You'll be in trouble.
Right, but that's one of the things too, Al, that had to be beneficial to you. Is, I mean, you got to learn different languages as well, and I mean, look at today, you could still speak it so many years later. So I mean, those are the type of things that are great about life, is when you could go out and learn different things.
That's it, and different cultures, and how the cultures are so different. Not so much in the eastern countries. And by that I mean the Asian countries. They do have the language. In fact, Korean and Chinese are similar when it comes to basic things such as numbers. If er san su wu, that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in Korean, if I remember it correctly, is il I sam sa o. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
But they're very similar. And of course, the Chinese and the Koreans can read the characters, the writing, the script of
Right.
the language, and they probably would pronounce them similarly, but might use words that are sort of different. But I had a great time at Yale, and in fact, when I was at Yale the second time for Chinese, that's when I met my wife. We've now been married 58 years. And there's another little backstory on that one. The first time at Yale, I met a woman from Hamden, and we dated, and then I had to go to Korea. And I said, I'm going to try to get back there to learn another language. I said at that time, I think they teach Chinese there as well. Well, as it turned out, I did volunteer to do that. And the problem was, I no sooner extended my enlistment so I would have enough time to learn the language and then go through some intelligence training at one of the air bases down south, and spend a tour of duty in whatever the country was. In this case, it was Chinese, and still have time left in my enlistment. I served a total of 7 years. I don't know if I mentioned that, but 7 years active duty. So, but I no sooner signed the extension to allow all that to happen when I got this letter from the woman in Hamden telling me how she had met somebody else.
Oh, man.
So, but those things happen in life. But my wife and I, Carolyn, she's so great, so supportive of everything I've done, and I think we make a good couple too. 58 years of marriage.
Well, congratulations on that. And interestingly enough, Al, I was going to bring this up as well. When you were starting out, especially at WTIC, I think a year into being there, you had a family. You had your son in 1969, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but so you kind of started your family right as you were trying to start your career as well.
Yes, 1969 was our second son, who regrettably passed away a few years back. He had a massive heart attack, and our son Mike. Tony was born in 1965.
Oh, okay, 65, yeah.
And then we have a daughter, Andrea. She does CT scans, CAT scans, if you will. For a company in the Hartford area. And so, she came along in 1973. So we 3 children, and now a bunch of grandchildren too.
Yeah. And, that's the thing too, Al, like now that you're retired, I'm sure at times you're bored, but grandkids are definitely, they keep you young and they keep you going to different events and stuff like that. And it's funny, one guy, I know him, I see him sometimes, at the supermarket, and he always said to me, he goes, I had children because I knew I'd have grandchildren someday. And it's really fun to be a grandfather because you kind of parents can't spoil their kids, but grandparents can. So, that makes it fun for you guys as well.
Yeah, it sure does. Especially just this year, we had 2 of our grandsons graduate from college. And one was at Colby up in Maine, and the other one was at Penn State. And they're both interested in a medical career. So I'm very proud of them. And then another brother, one of Tony's boys, is going to be graduating in the spring from Hartford's Trinity College. And in fact, Tony's 2 boys played football against each other at the college level.
Oh, wow.
Because Colby and Trinity are in the same conference, the NESCAC New England Small College group, that conference. And so one was on offense, and the other one was on defense.
Wow.
They didn't hurt each other at all. Neither one of them got hurt by anything that the brother did.
Right.
So that was good. That was good.
And I know, Al, if I remember correctly, your son Michael was a big Yankees fan, and I think his boys
Yes.
were as well. I mean, were you a big Yankees fan growing up? I mean, did you like baseball?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York, as you know, so I very much liked the Yankees. When I came to Connecticut, however, WTIC Radio was the Red Sox station.
Yeah.
So I got into that mode by just being there, being there and being around the dialogue and the one announcer or broadcaster talking about his favorite player, and I'll talk about my favorite player. And that's how Tony became a Red Sox fan rather than a Yankees fan. But I think he's bothered by that a little bit. You know, he said, why are you a Yankees fan? Well, you know, I mean, I respect both teams. They storied history, and you know, with stars on both teams, it was just fun to follow them all. But I got interested in the Red Sox because of WTIC Radio.
Right, definitely. And speaking of, Connecticut, 1980, you returned to Connecticut at Channel 8, and that was a 14-year run that, that's where, I grew up in the 80s. I was a young kid, and that's where I remember you. And I really believe, Al, in that era is really where you just became really big in Connecticut, because I can remember being at these charity basketball games, and I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and every kid knew who Al Terzi was. So, I mean, would you say,
really?
yeah, would you say that
Wow.
That run on Channel 8 really kind of established you as, like, where you felt like, you know what, I've made it in this business?
Yes, and Channel 8 was fun too, because it was there that I came back from Florida. I think you remember I worked in Florida for a time in the West Palm Beach area, and by then I had been flying airplanes, and the general manager of the station that hired me, he invited me to come down there and fly his planes. So I learned how to fly twin engine planes, and unfortunately, I had an accident. But fortunately, everybody survived. There were four people plus myself, so 5 people on the plane. We had to make an emergency landing in just south of Tallahassee's airport. I had taken some people from the TV station to a broadcasters conference in Florida's capital, and I was coming in for the approach when all of a sudden one engine quit, and then the other one within 30 seconds quit. And I'm looking, wait a minute, what is going on here? I know I have plenty of fuel, and it wasn't as if the engine was choking or anything like that. So I didn't realize there was any kind of fuel problem. And but what I remembered is the instructor always said when I was learning to fly, right from the first days in single engine planes, you have to, whatever's going on, you have to fly the airplane. That's the first thing you have to focus on, because especially if you got other people in there whose lives depend on what you do. So I figured I wasn't going to make the airport in Tallahassee, and because it was still a couple of miles away when all this was going on, and I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get to the airport. So I tried to look for a clearing in the woods below me. They were all 60 feet high, maybe even a little taller, trees in a forested area south of Tallahassee. And I kept looking, not frantically, but with great concern, that I was going to find a clearing. There was a clearing in the woods. The problem was it was a very small clearing. So, and I had to clear the trees before getting down on the ground. So what I didn't want to do is come in and land and still be going too fast and crash into the trees on the opposite side of the clearing from the point of the touchdown. So it was. I think I had company in the cockpit. I think I know I had company in the cockpit. There were 5 people on board plus I think I was getting some company from God on that plane. I don't know how I got it down, but I got it down, and everybody walked away from the plane. One had a broken ankle, another one a back injury, and that was the extent of it, except for me, because I was launched into the cockpit, the array of instruments. I went face first into the control panels in front of me in my seat, and I was knocked out. I came to and got out of the airplane, but everybody else was gone. I was hoping they were all right. I walked over to them, and they saw me, and they said, "Oh my God, you're alive!" And I said, "Yes, why?" And of course, I was bleeding profusely from my face, and they said they thought I was dead.
Oh, wow.
And they were just huddled over on the side, maybe 40 yards away, waiting for an ambulance to come, because I had relayed to the airport control tower that we got a problem. I'm going to have to make a landing. And they said they thought I had died, because when they got out of the plane, I was slumped over the wheel, meaning the control panel, not the panel, but the where you steer the plane.
Right.
And I was bleeding profusely coming out, and but they took me I was taken to the hospital, and was in the hospital for 10 days or 9 days, actually, I think. Yeah, and so that was October 1978, and then I had several surgeries over the course of the next year and a half. And then CNN came along and was trying to entice me to join CNN. But this was back before they went on the air. They were trying to get a crew together of anchors and reporters. And I went there, and the contract wasn't nearly as good as I hoped. And so it turned out that Channel 8 was also looking to have me come back to Connecticut. They wanted me to come back and be competitive with Channel 3, because Pat Sheehan, who had also worked at Channel 3 when I was there, had moved to Channel 8. And they thought it'd be great to get me there too. And I thought it was great too, because then moving the kids back, 3 children, school children, and getting them, back there where their friends were from before we left, I thought would be important for their adjustment, and it would be making the new school area not really so new to them. Because we moved back and we went into Southington, where we live now still. So that's the plane crash story, and I'm just grateful to be alive. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because I really didn't know that about you. So I mean, you overcame adversity, especially with that. And I mean, nowadays, I mean, we're in 2023, so I mean, the planes, there's so much more things that go into it, but they're inspected well. Not that they weren't inspected back then, but I mean, in 1978, it wasn't easy to survive a plane crash. So I mean, it really is remarkable that everybody came out okay.
It sure is. I'm grateful to God, and grateful for the people who supported me all through that. I wondered, because my face was severely damaged, whether I was ever going to be able to do television again, because I had a lot of surgeries. And I got a card from a woman in Connecticut who sent me this card only 2 weeks after her son was killed in an accident. in a car accident, and here she is writing me to wish me well. And her card had an interesting quote in it, and I've held it close to me since then. And that was that because I was worried about not being able to do TV, as I mentioned, but she set me straight with that message in the card. A man's life is not measured by what happens to him, but rather by what he does with what happens to him. So I thought that's interesting. That's a challenge. So I'm going to go up there and just do everything I can to do the people's work, get the news and get it straight, make it accurate and make it understandable, and maybe help some other people along the way. So, and that's the way my career went. I met and got to know a lot of people who've gone on to other things, not other than broadcasting, but other places to do it, and in different formats and so on. So I've had a great life. I'm 80 now, you know.
Oh, you know what? You look great. But Al, the other thing too, that when I would watch over the years, one of the toughest things I'm sure about doing a newscast is when you have to report something tragic or something very sad, because that can't be easy. I mean, again, sometimes you might know the people, sometimes most of the time you don't. But I mean, to still have to report stuff like that, when I think of Reggie Lewis, the Boston Celtics player, I found out about his death from you. I can remember Coach was on ABC and they broke away for a second and you kind of reported it real quick. And I remember that. And I mean, you looked visibly shaken over that. But I mean, how do you try to do the news and understand that it's sad what's going on, but you still have to report it? I mean, that's got to be difficult at times. So.
Well, sure it is. I'll never forget the day Sandy Hook happened. I was on my way to work, and that's where I heard for the first time that morning that there had been a shooting at the school, and at Sandy Hook Elementary. I mean, I couldn't believe it, and I was hoping that the kids were okay, but I was afraid that there would be at least several wounded. I didn't expect to hear what I heard when I was driving past the park, Bushnell Park in Hartford, on my way to the TV station, which then was Fox 61, which was located and is still located in the Hartford Current building. And when I heard that so many children and the people who worked at the school had been killed, it just was so shocking. And when I got there, what did they do? They put me right down on a chair, and I was on the air, it turned out, for some 7 hours, but with very little information. We were trying like crazy to get information. The police were very tight-lipped. You may have heard or read back then. They're very tight-lipped. They wanted to make sure that they didn't let out any information that was going to compromise the investigation into what happened. And it was just horrible. 7 hours straight with no information. And we just had to, if we heard a network, say ABC or CBS or somebody like that, some operation like that, if they had gotten some information, we would present it to the audience, but we would qualify it as being, we would give a mention of the station where the information came from, because there's a possibility that maybe one of them had misunderstood something, and it wasn't. It turned out not to be correct. So,
right. Yeah. So, Al, I mean, you were with Channel 8 for 14 years, and then in '94 you went back to Channel 3, and I mean, you really had a long stay there, 18 years. So, I mean, just talk about that, because I mean, Fox 61 has always been a very respected news station. I mean, they give you the best news possible. Talk about that experience going back there.
Well, yes, right. Fox 61, which was the former home of the in Hartford, where I had worked. There's no question that that was a great experience. And at Fox 61, it was fun to be among a group of younger people. When I was at Channel 3, WTIC, uh, it was a lot of very experienced and older people, older than I, and that was itself a great opportunity because I was learning from all of these veterans, people who worked in New York City and other places, and who'd done great work, and they were still doing great work at WTIC Radio and TV. They also had an FM station where you would sit and play operatic music and light classics and that sort of stuff. Then our shifts were rotated around. So we would spend a few hours here doing this and a few hours on the TV doing that, and other things. We couldn't write the news back then. We had to, whereas now you have to be an accomplished journalist. You have to be able to write the news, synthesize it from whatever news sources you have, and just trim it down to maybe tell a story in 20 seconds or 30 seconds, whatever the producer of the newscast would find allowable. So it was I had a wide range of experiences and learning opportunities, and I soaked it up as best I could, learned from all the veterans that were there the first time through, and then met new people, and then I sort of updated my approach to the news and the reporting of the news. It was a little bit more stringent. Maybe some people would say dull. It was more straightforward when I was at Channel 3 the first time, but of course, by the time I got back there the second time in 1994, everybody was a lot younger and had different outlooks on life and events and the way the news should be reported and so on. But I've just been so lucky. I've had so much experience, learned so much from so many people. I couldn't have gotten to where I was as quickly as I did without that experience. I'll never forget my first audition for TV. I was stationed at an air base in Texas, and they needed a new weather person at the local TV station. And one of the guys in the office said to me, well, hey, you could go do that. Why don't you go do that? I had been on the radio a little before that for a while, but had to leave because of security reasons. There was a security risk at the station, and the military police and other investigators didn't want me to be around there because they were going to make a move on what was going on there. So anyway, getting back to what I was talking about, what was I saying? I'm sorry. It gets sometimes I run all these stories together and then I forget where I was.
Yeah, you were talking about being at Fox 61 and
yeah,
the different things that you saw over the years and stuff like that, and having to report stories and things of that nature.
Yes, it's well, it wasn't always pleasant, but when it was pleasant, it was fun. When it was sad, it was horrible. And but you have to deal with the emotion and keep it close. People at home, you're not supposed to cry on TV, but I was near tears a number of occasions, and especially at Sandy Hook, I was out of it.
That was just a terrible time. I mean, it really was. Yeah. Ironically, Al, you talk about being in Hartford. One event, and it was, to me, it was both sports and newsworthy, was 1997 when they decided to move the Whalers out of Hartford and move them to Carolina. Oh, yeah. Talk about that, because I mean, I know it was just it felt like the worst time in Connecticut, because that was the one professional sports team they had, and they had lost it. So just talk about, covering the news when that was going on, because I mean, there were a lot of angry people.
There sure were. And I don't remember the name of the gentleman who came in, and well, a lot of people wouldn't call him a gentleman; they'd call him something else. But who took the team down to the Carolinas, and I don't think that person is involved in any hockey now. But the biggest thrill for me was in being invited to be in the parade uh, when the Whalers were doing very well in the parade when they had won. Now so long ago, just talking about the 70s. Um, I try to remember what it was, but in any case, it was great to be with the team because it was a professional team. That was our only professional team at that time, as I recall, professional sports team. And we were, of course, this was then we had the anticipation of getting a football team here, the Patriots. There was that
which
I
looked
lived
like it
through.
was going, which looked like it was going to happen. Then it fell through.
Yeah, of course it fell through because there was no seriousness behind it on behalf of the owner of the Patriots. He was just trying to get a little leverage to make Massachusetts move and build them a new stadium. And so Governor Rowland was the governor then, and he was obviously quite embarrassed by all the hoopla that he rightfully thought was worth. He was proud to be celebrating a professional team like the Patriots coming to Connecticut, and you know what? It was just a ruse to get a stadium built, and so that went on. But it was fun. It was fun, and when the hockey team was here, I enjoyed going to things at the Civic Center, uh, events, and seeing meeting the teammates, Ron Francis, and all the rest of the guys, and it was a thrill. But you never know what kinds of things you're going to be involved with on any day you go to work. It's like any other career. You go there and you expect this to happen and that to happen, and then some things don't happen, or sometimes you have a very, very good day. But you never know in news what's going to come your way.
Right. So let me ask you, Al, who are some of the people that were influences in your life, in your career, or even people not in your career, just like that kind of helped you be, I don't want to say be successful, but helped you that you learned from and that you appreciate the help they gave you along the way?
Well, the old Channel 3 crew, Channel 3 TV, and the radio station, WTIC Radio crew, obviously were immensely important to me to learn how to. Of course, they did have at that time, they had a pronunciation guide for everything. Uh, and you had to adhere to the pronunciation guide. They talk about a gubernatorial election, which means a government election for governor, but they had us pronounce it gubernatorial. The U was pronounced like a U,
Right.
gubernatorial. So they had different things like that, but they wanted to be precise, and I saluted that. I mean, I learned the right way to pronounce things, and although I'm still not sure about gubernatorial, I think people get gubernatorial better.
Yeah.
Uh, but I learned a lot from all of those guys, and Dick Pertell and Bob Steele, of course. He was always there helping me out, and this was that's how my career really took off in broadcasting at WTIC. So it's an important place in my life, and all those people. We get together occasionally still, the WTIC game, and well, I just pinch myself because I've been so lucky in my career.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was 2002, Al, because I don't care how many years you work in news or, how successful you are, you like to be recognized for what you accomplish. And you were recognized by the Boston, New England chapter of the National Academy of Television Arts and Science. I think you got the Silver and Gold Circle, which honors television professionalism and who have made a great contribution, not only to the industry, but also the community. So talk about winning that award, because that had to be very special for you.
Well, it sure was, because I had never won anything like that. And it was, I didn't know how to handle that. That was a new experience. A lot, learning how to handle experiences and how you should comport yourself is so important in any career, I think, to be successful. But I mean, just to get an honor like that, I mean, the honors for the years, they recognize somebody sticking with a job and doing things that help the community, being active in the community, which I think everybody should find a way to be active in the community. If it could be volunteering, driving people to their medical appointments, it could be. I mean, if you're not working, of course, you have that time. But if you're working, you can still find ways to volunteer and make your community better. It could be reading to kids in school. You might be invited, and I was invited on a number of occasions to go to schools, elementary schools, and read to kids. And I love to watch their faces light up when I would change my voice to match the characters in the story. And so, just being out in the community, and that just establishes you as a member of the community and one who cares about the community. And you're not just somebody who's driving in to go to work and then you go home at night, and you're not doing anything for the city where you're employed. I think that's so important, and community involvement is important for everybody. And
Yeah.
I hope I set a good example of that by what I did, and maybe motivated some other people to do the same thing.
Right. So Al, I know that you're retired from working at a news station, but I have to believe that you're not retired from working. I believe that you're still going to do stuff. Do you have any projects that you like to talk about that you might have lined up? I mean, what's next for Al Terzi?
Who knows what's next? I don't know. It's I've had the fortune of being invited to teach in the community college system, and so I teach government and public speaking. Public speaking is a hard course because most people just don't want to have to get up. I mean, if you go to a funeral, the people in the pews at the church who have come to honor the deceased person, maybe a relative or just a friend, somebody they knew, and who passed away, they would rather be in the casket than have to go up there and deliver part of a eulogy.
Yeah.
That's how nervous people are when it gets to public speaking. Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, came up with that, and it's been published in at least one textbook for public speaking class. Public speaking is so important in your career development. If you can get up and say a few words at an event for your company at some time, or preside over a particular event at work, employers like that. They like people who can get up and maybe talk about the company and help promote the company. And you find that if you can do that, you're going to do better in a job interview in the first place, because you're not going to be so nervous. Why are people so nervous? Well, I tell them in class, it's because you've never done this before. You've always
Yeah.
shied away from it. So you're nervous, and also you worry about people making judgments about you. Well, what if I make a mistake, and so on and so forth. But in my class, I get them up speaking the very first day, sometimes within the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then they do it, and they don't fumble because they haven't done it before, and then we start teaching them piece by piece how to prepare for this, and how to be better, and how to be not so nervous. But it's important to be at least a little nervous, because if you're not at least a little nervous, you get too comfortable, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you're not going to be as good a speaker. So I enjoy that. And government, I've been teaching state and local government also. But who knows how long that's going to go on. I mean, I'm at a point where I'm thinking maybe I want to kick back and just find some other way to volunteer in the community and do that for the rest of my life.
Right. Now, let me ask you this, Al. I mean, I know former hosts who retire, whether it's radio or TV, they occasionally come back and fill in. They might do like a weekend once in a while. They might, do a guest show once in a while. Would you ever go back to doing any of that, like on a, a once in a while type basis?
Well, if I'm invited, I certainly would give it every consideration. Seriously. It just depends on how I feel at that point, what my health situation is or whatever. I think I'm in very good health for this state of my life, but I know I play golf and enjoy running. I still do that. And, I feel good. I feel like I could just go on and on and on. Although reality sets in and you say, well, you're not going to go on and on and on. But, well, in the religious realm, in that part of me, I believe we all will go on and on and on, but not here. So that's the teaching of the church. So and I hold that close to my heart.
Right. So, Al, I mean, the majority of your career has been spent in Connecticut. So, just talk to me. What has Connecticut meant to you personally?
Well, Connecticut is where I met my wife and where our children were all born, and so many grandchildren also born here. So, I mean, this is I grew up in upstate New York, and as I mentioned early on, but one of the places where I thought about going to college was going to college in Middletown. And you know the name of the school over there.
Yeah. And I mean,
Wesleyan
yeah,
University.
yeah,
And but then I found out how expensive it was there. So I scratched that off the list, unfortunately. And we were on a trip once when I was a teenager, about 15. My dad was driving my two brothers and me and my mom. We were taking a tour. We went up to Boston to visit some of his relatives and then came back through on our way to New York City. We came through Middletown. And that was my first time in a Connecticut city. And now I have been teaching at a school, Middlesex Community College, which is in Middletown. So, sometimes you find these connections all coming back. You went through the town when you were a teenager, and now here you are as an adult and teaching in a college. And not too far from where you had hoped to go to college after high school, and that didn't work out for a number of reasons. But the biggest reason was my parents, unfortunately, had they had a tough marriage, and they decided to divorce. And then when that happened, I wasn't sure where I was going to go for college, but I started in Binghamton at the college there, and then went into the Air Force and ended up at Yale. And so, I mean, I have to pinch myself a lot of times when I start thinking about all the things I've done and where I've been in the world, and I've just been so blessed by every experience and every person I've met.
right. So, Al, before we go, what you've done 50 years in this business, over 50 years, but what would you like to say to the many people over the years, which is a ton of people that have watched you, whether you've been on channel 3, channel 8, 61? I mean, what would you say to that audience that watched you and supported you for so many years?
Well, of course, I'd like to give each and
Oh, we lost Al for a second. We'll see if we could get him back, but somehow we lost him. Sometimes that happens, so hopefully we'll get him back. But what you've just heard for the last 50 minutes is just a remarkable career. I mean, he really has had a Hall of Fame career. I mean, the things he's done. I mean, I said this before. It's very hard to stay at one station for a very long time. And I mean, he was at WTIC for 10 years. He briefly was at a station in Florida. Then he was at Channel 8 for 14 years. Then he was at Channel 3 again for 18 years. And then he was at Fox 61 for almost 10 years. So, I mean, that's a credit to him and the type of newscaster, journalist, broadcaster, whatever you want to call it, he is, because I mean, he has been able to stand the test of time. And I mean, he's done it for, like I said, over 50 years. And I mean, that really says something about Al Terzi and what he's done. I mean, I've said this so many times. He really is, in my opinion, the most famous broadcaster in Connecticut. He really is. I mean, because you've seen him every night on the news. I mean, giving you his very best. And I mean, you heard him before say that sometimes you cover great events, and then there's others that are really gut wrenching and very hard to take sometimes. And he's been able to do that. I'm hoping he could get back on, because he was answering, which was my final question. We were about to wrap this up, so I'm hoping he's able to get back on. But if he isn't, I would tell you this, that he's very appreciative of the support that listeners like myself, who have loved his work for so many years. I told him this before, and it's really true. I mean, I was at a charity basketball game when I was a young kid, and I didn't really know who he was yet. I was like 7 or 8 years old, but the older kids who were like 10 or 11 years old, they knew who he was. I could still remember one kid just constantly yelling his name, Al, hey Al, because he had identified with him. And I mean, we see celebrities all the time on TV, but when you live in Connecticut, you're seeing this guy every single night. You really are. So that to me is just, he set a standard in broadcasting, especially, like I said, in the state of Connecticut, because I mean, we're a small state, but there's a lot of great things that have happened in our state. And Al Terzi's one of them. He really is. And, he's a credit to the business. He's a credit to the broadcasting industry. He's really one of those, unforgettable people. And I mean, think about this. I mean, he has done that. I can't imagine doing it 30 years, and he did it for over 50 years. And you could see how proud he is as a family man. He really cherishes his family and what they've meant to him. And I mean, that's ultimately what, why, you live life, is to have a family and to do things in your career. And I mean, he's done that, and he's really a credit to the profession. He really is. And like I said, I mean, till COVID, he was still working. I mean, he never stopped. I mean, he wanted to keep going. And I really believe if COVID didn't happen, he's probably still working today. Unfortunately, a lot of people were kind of forced to retire because of COVID, because when, there wasn't as much going on, unfortunately, a lot of people ended up having to retire, which I don't, some probably were ready for it, but some probably weren't. And I don't think Al was, but that's who he is as an individual. And doesn't seem to look like he's going to make it back on here, which is unfortunate, but it doesn't take away from the great interview he gave us. And it was a real honor for me. I really idolized him as a broadcaster, because again, I'm from Connecticut, and you always want to see the people in your town and in your state do well. And I mean, your community. And he's one of us. He really is. And I mean, he's, like I said, to me, when it comes to newscasting, I think when you talk about the, terrific and most memorable newscasters in the state of Connecticut, you have to start with Al Terzi. You really do. So I really appreciate him giving us the time he did. For In the Spotlight, this is Mike Kenichi saying goodbye, everyone.